Hey, you guys! Welcome back to another episode of For Such Time as This, a podcast about calling, timing, and trusting God in the season that you're actually in, not just the one you hope to be in. I'm your host, Bethany. This season is called Creative Calling, so I'm talking to a whole bunch of different creatives in the ministry field. So sit back, relax, and be expectant for what the Lord might have for you in this episode. Hi guys, today I have my friend Pastor Khori from Grace Fellowship Church. I'm super excited to have him. He's a preacher and author, and his book, Bridges Between Us, is just like a pathway to unity across like the racial divide.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. It's a great book. I'm gonna plug it in there for you.
I appreciate the floor.
All right, Pastor Khori, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Our privilege.
I'm gonna just start at the beginning. How did you get into ministry in the first place?
How did I get in the ministry in the first place? Well, first, I'm excited about your ministry and how God is using you to do this and you stepping out in faith and being obedient to the call. So thank you. I know this was beyond what you thought you would be doing, but God saw it and He's using you. I've been watching
Oh, thanks.
all you creative people and the people you've had on here. So thank you. So for me, for ministry, I think it began in a hard place. When I first met the Lord, I was in a broken place. Like all of us, none of us come to the Lord, with clean hands. And so I had been living a life away from the Lord. I was in my early 20s and I had lived a life of just chasing what the world says to chase, the drugs, the lust, things, materials, all those things I had done, and nothing was really pleasing me. And I found myself in a really broken place. But God met me there. I used to throw all these huge parties back in the day, and they would last days, some of them, just like,
Oh, wow.
and we'd get hundreds of people there. Like, it would just be like crazy. This is back when I was in college. And so when I got saved, when the Lord met me, when someone invited me to church, I gave my life to the Lord. One of the things that I began to ask the Lord is, how do you use somebody like me? Like, I've done so many messed up things. I've been a ringleader of parties and chaos and confusion. Like, how do you use me? And I remember the Lord saying to me, like, I gave you those gifts of leadership. I gave you those gifts of encouraging people. I gave you those gifts of rallying people. I just wanted you to use those things for me. And so I still want you to do those things, but I want you to do it for me. And so I began to say, well, gosh, Lord, I never saw it that way. Thank you. And so that's when I began to see, began to sense ministering to people, encouraging people, is my passion, helping people to experience Jesus and just the full life that is found in Him. And instead of leading people astray into chaos, confusion, a ministry of hopefully leading people to experience the full life that is only found in Jesus Christ. So that's kind of how I ended up in ministry, first recognizing the call on my life was the most important thing. Now, obviously, there were steps in going into seminary after that, once I embraced that call. Right. But it all began with first understanding what He had placed inside of me and what He had called me to do as an agent of His peace and grace. So
yeah. As soon as He placed it inside of you and you kind of had that revelation, was there then oh, I need to go to seminary and go become a pastor, or that later in the line?
That's a really good question. Yeah, I don't think it was immediate. I think I began to first get a hunger and thirst for His word. It was like this ferocious appetite to learn the Bible. So I began to read the Bible all day long. I began to study it. I would go sit in Barnes and Nobles. At the time, I was living downtown in Baltimore City, and I would go to this restaurant, the Paper Moon Diner, and I would sit in there at the counter. I would order something, and I would sit in there for hours and hours reading my Bible. And I remember one time I was just reading it ferociously and just so passionately. And that's when I began to want more. I was like, there's got to be more. Maybe there's more. And then I started to explore seminary.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of how I started the seminary journey. Yeah.
And then with writing, when did that become an idea?
Oh gosh.
Long after?
Well, what's funny is my mom, growing up, always told me that I was a good writer.
Okay.
And so that's where it was first instilled in me that writing was a skill, perhaps maybe even a gift. I don't know. My mom was a really good writer. My mom got her master's and doctorate in mental health, and she did a lot of writing when we were growing up. I would see her writing long papers, and so when I was in high school, she would check my papers. She'd be like, "Let me see that paper," and me and my brother were always scared, like, "Mom," because she'd be like, "We need to, we're gonna have to fix this, fix that," and so I learned how to write from my mom because she would be like, "We gonna get this paper right," and so that's kind of where I first realized that if I ever needed to write something, that it was a strength. It was a strength in college. I loved writing essays and things like that, and book reports. But I didn't know I would write a book. But yeah, that came later.
Okay. But you enjoyed writing even when you were younger? Like your essays and book reports? Or you were good at it?
Well, so for me, it was like a safety net. So I love taking classes where they're like, okay, your final report or your final grade is going to be a paper or a book report, because I knew I could do well on those instead of like a test where it's like 1 to 50 and all these answers, and
Okay.
because I never knew if that was going to go well. But I knew if there was a book report or I had a hand in the paper, like I'm going to get an A. That's just how I mean, my mom trained me on how to write a good paper, and so I knew I could at least do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know about anything else, but I could write a good paper.
So what inspired you to write this book?
What inspired me to write this book, Bridges Between Us? Well, so in many ways, this particular book was being written um, from the time that I was young. I always felt like the Lord had me and my brother in a place where we had to be bridge builders. My mom and dad were divorced when we were about 3, and so we were born, in Baltimore City, but moved to Baltimore County at some point in time. And when my parents got divorced, my grandmother stepped in and really helped to raise us as well, and she was doing Baltimore City. So we spent a lot of time in Baltimore County and Baltimore City. And at that time, there was a very different environments, and so we were learning sort of life in the city and life in the county.
Yeah.
And the different cultures that were there. And so for me, I began to just know that there had to be bridges between people from different backgrounds and cultures. I was in a diverse environments. I was forced to understand diverse environments, diverse cultures, diverse people and places. So then one of the things that happened to me was when I began to throw parties later on in college, and I'm skipping ahead, and when I wasn't saved, my parties were diverse. It was like all kinds of people, different backgrounds and things like that. And, we were all getting crazy. And then when I got saved, one of the things I realized, I started going to church, is the churches were not diverse. So I'd be like, wait a minute. It was kind of weird to me. I said, well, how is it that when I was throwing crazy parties,
Yeah.
we had, what we had liquor and bad stuff, and we had all kinds of people coming together.
Right.
But when I go to church, the churches were this group or that group.
Yeah.
And so I began to think, like, is there a bridge? Can't Christ be that bridge? And as I began to study in seminary, I began to realize God's heart for oneness and unity, all nations, all people. We see this in the book of Revelations. It talks about every nation, every tribe, every tongue coming together, gathered at the throne and at the Lamb, singing in one voice to Jesus. And so that began to get instilled in me. And then had been in ministry for many years at that point in time before the book was inspired. But I had these experiences in seminary. Actually went to Howard University School of Divinity, and I began to learn about the scriptures and what God's heart said about all people, all nations. But it kind of was just in me. But then 2020 came, and you remember COVID,
Yeah.
churches were on lockdown. People were stuck in their homes, nothing
Yeah.
to do. And then the George Floyd's tragic death situation happened.
Yeah.
And our country was all of a sudden on fire.
Yeah.
There was a lot of racial tension. And that's when it was like, well, gosh, what's the answer to this? And it was like, Jesus. He's the only source and the only one that can draw together people from all nations, tribes, and tongues. And so that's where the heart of this book came from a lived out experience, and then a theological experience in seeing what Jesus and his word says about all people.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Wow. So it's just from a long time coming.
it was, it was very much a long time coming. And in fact, in seminary at Howard, I did study for my master's thesis was on racial sectarianism within the walls of the Christian church, a brief history and solution. So I was always trying to understand why. So Martin Luther King said that Sunday morning was the most segregated hour. And sadly, that's still true today.
Yeah.
And so I became intrigued as to why. So why is nowhere else like that? So you and I could walk into Starbucks and we could bet right now that it would be diverse.
Right.
We could walk into Walmart and it would be diverse.
Right.
And on Sunday morning, we could bet that we could walk into many churches and there would probably be no diversity.
Right.
And so it's like, why is that?
Yeah.
What's going on inside of us? And why isn't the gospel permeating that? Because certainly when you look in the scriptures, you start to see a different picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about the writing process, like the highs and the lows?
Oh, let me tell you right now, if you want to write a book, writing a book is hard. And so one of the things that I began to study. But so before I started writing a book, I was just like, what is it like to write a book? And I looked it up and it was like, writing a book is very hard. So for me, I didn't set out to write a book. When everything was going on with the tension of sort of the racial tension in our country and in churches, I began to lead conversations about oneness and unity among all people and nations and how God sees us all. And, the Bible says that we're all made in his image, right? And if we began to see people first made in the image of God as his children, then we could come together first as a bridge there to say, that's a child of God. That's a child of God, instead of naming people as labels.
Yeah.
So as I began to have these conversations with a good friend of mine and talking about this theology and God's heart, she's looked at me and said, you're pregnant with a book. This stuff's just coming out of you.
Right.
And I was like, what? She said, well, my sister wrote a book. She's a New York Times bestselling author. And when she gets like this, she's ready to write another book. You're like that right now. I was like, what? So then she said, what if I help you? Like, I've actually helped, to edit her stuff. Let's talk to her about the project, see if she's willing to help. And I was like, okay. And it sort of took off from there. That was the conversation. Someone encouraged me to write a book when they recognized that I had so much content in me. It's like, you got to get this out of you on paper.
Yeah.
And so I was like, let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Was there specific highs that you can remember about writing the book, or like just when it was done?
Yeah. So the highs, I think, was when so one of the things about writing a book is I learned is that before you start writing things down, you really need to think about who the target is, who's the person. You actually want to name that person. I'm thinking about this person, you name them. And because if you don't have that target, you write just all over the place.
Yeah.
So once we had the target and once we had the outline of the subject matter we would cover and the way we would cover it, I was pretty excited. I'm like, okay, good. With this clarity, like this is actually a book. It's not just going to be of a bunch of pages.
Right.
Because I had the support of professionals, I was really excited because they told me too. They said there will be no punctuation errors in this thing. It's going to be ready to rock. And so I was like, great. So that was exciting.
Okay.
And then I started writing and writing and writing. And then it wasn't as fun because it would require that there were days I wrote for 10 hours. It required that I actually wrote on 2 vacations that I had. I just wrote. I'm like, "Honey, go play with the kids on the beach. Unfortunately, I gotta write today." So I'd write for 10 hours at a time. I was drinking a lot of coffee. So those were some of the less fun. Yeah.
Did you like have deadlines, or you chose to write for 10 hours at a time just because you wanted to get it done?
Yeah, so we did have deadlines.
Okay.
We did set yeah, we had a sort of a date that we targeted for the book
Okay.
launch, and then we worked back from there. And so those deadlines that we set, they were a little bit flexible, but not really. You have to have deadlines or you just
Yeah,
be,
or just
"Oh, you're never
get
gonna
done.
do it."
Yeah. That's
So I was working with another writer as well, and so we worked in tandem, and she was very skilled at looking at my work and then kind of bringing it together, making sure everything was clear, you know. And but yes, there were a lot of deadlines. Yeah.
So with this season, we're talking to a whole bunch of different creatives, and I
Yeah.
like creativity comes in so many different forms.
Yeah.
So with being a speaker, preacher, author,
Yeah.
uh, what does the creative process look like when you're like prepping sermons or when you were writing the book? What's the creativity process behind it?
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, what's interesting in the way that I'm wired, my father, he was an artist. And so he painted, he drew, he very much communicated the best through his artwork. And that's something that me and my twin brother actually picked up as well. So at a very young age, I learned to paint, learned to, do ceramics, those kinds of things. My twin brother actually still does a lot of amazing paintings now. And so for me, creativity, I feel like it may sound strange, but I feel like I'm wired for creativity. I'm very right brained, like, and so for me in my sermon prep process, what I first do is I'm praying, Lord, like what is the message from your word that you want to say for this time and season? So then I begin to study the text, study, the passage, and I allow the passage to speak. These are the things that the Lord wants to illuminate for this time and season. Once those are clear, then the creativity on how to illustrate, tell the story, use a prop, those kinds of things. Those things for me just sort of spring up out of the air. A lot of times it comes from not trying to think about how to be creative that the creativity comes.
Yeah.
Bernie Mac used to say that his best jokes would pop up when he was laying like on the couch. He would just, oh, a joke just came, right? I feel like that's the same for me when I'm praying about how to be creative or how to help people to see a truth. It just sort of, once you understand what you're trying to convey, then the illustrations just sort of come. Yeah.
Do you think it was similar for writing the book as it is for sermon prep, or different?
Yeah. So initially, I wouldn't have said it was similar. Initially, I was just writing, and just study because there's a lot of facts, a lot of history in the book that I wrote. So it's theological, but it's also historical. And so there was a lot of tactical, specific things that had to be done. Once we had all that down, almost like a sermon, then the illustrations of how to lead people into the conversation began to pop up. And so later on in the book writing process, I began to have a lot of fun. How do we illustrate this idea? And so there were a lot of similarities that later began to partner and be similar to preaching. Yeah.
Hey, you guys, it's me again. Don't worry, I'll be right back with our guests. I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you so much for spending time with us today. I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Let's sit and think about what might have been said that can relate to your life today. And if you're enjoying it, make sure you like, subscribe, follow, comment, all the things. You can find us on YouTube for such time as this with Bethany Garner, or you can find us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. All right, let's get back to them. How does your faith and prayer shape your creativity process?
Yeah. I think one of the things for me is prayer is about communicating with God. And I think in communicating with God, there are times like any other relationship where you spend a lot of time being together communicating. So like, and we do that with our family. We're gonna do Thanksgiving. We're gonna be together communicating for a long time today, right? And so sometimes I'm with God communicating for a long time, a long session today in prayer. And then sometimes, like in your relationship, I'm gonna make a phone call real quick. Hey, checking in, that kind of thing. So I think for me is I'm always trying to listen, in the small moments, in the big moments, but the Bible says to pray without ceasing. And so I think it's about keeping your heart in a posture of prayer in the little moments and the big moments. And so for me, I feel like as long as I remain open, the Lord is always faithful. He's always communicating, and you hear his voice, and he's very creative. So
Right.
I'm never sure for ideas because he just, the Lord was very creative. I mean, you think about it, when you look into the first pages of scripture, it says, in the beginning, God created.
Yeah.
Created. So
Yeah.
he's very creative.
And then we're created in his image. So we have the creativity in it.
Absolutely.
So your book is a lot on unity, especially within the church. What impact have you seen us sharing the message?
Yeah. Well, what was really neat is, so we did a series on the book, Bridge Between Us, a path for unity through faith, empathy, and mutual understanding, actually at Grace Fellowship Church. And it was right on the heels of sort of the racial tension that happened in our country. And a lot of people were trying to address this, and we were trying to do the part we felt like God was calling us to do. And so we did a series on this in our congregation. I think it was a 6-week series. We walked everyone through sort of the major themes in the book, and then we sold copies of the book also at the church. And what it did, which was so good and we were grateful for, was it took this sort of complex, messy conversation about culture and race, and it put in a theological lens. And we were all speaking the same language and understanding how God sees us first as his children, made in his image. And then as we become Christ followers, it takes it even further and says, now our citizenship is in heaven. That there's no Jew, no Greek, no slave, nor free. We're all one in Christ. And so we get a new identity. And as we begin to see that, we have a new identity in Christ, that I'm your brother and you're my sister. Now we can lock arms and say, but why isn't this spiritual reality of oneness in Christ true in this broken world? And we can then now yield into the conversation. So there were a lot of conversations being had. There was a lot of transparency, and I feel like our church grew more diverse and more biblical through the process of us going through this book and understanding God's heart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How do you engage with the community outside of like your congregation?
Yeah. So one of the neat things is a chaplain also as well with the NFL alumni. So I work with a lot of former NFL players, mostly Baltimore Ravens players. And so we were having these conversations as well among players, among athletes, and also as well trying to understand God's heart for unity and oneness. And so we began to have conversations as well with players, conversations in the community with other folks as well. Actually have a website as well where, I'm more than willing to facilitate conversations where people can come together to understand these issues and how to have this conversation in a way that doesn't have to be explosive, where there can be respect, where there can be, some empathy as well, and the understanding where we're each coming from.
Yeah. What's your website so I can put it in?
What is it? I think it's khorismith.com. I should know this. I don't ever go to my own website.
I'll double check.
But I believe it's khorismith.com. Okay. Double check it.
Yeah.
I hope it's still up.
Double check where I put it out there. What practical steps can the listeners take to work on building their own bridges in their communities?
Yeah. Well, one practical step, I'm going to just say it, is read the book.
Yeah.
Bridge Between Us. And I think it's going to help us to understand first why there's such a gap in our starting places on this conversation about race and culture. We're so often we're starting in different parts of the story, in different chapters of the story, and we don't understand. One of the things I talk about in the book is that when you first watch the movie Star Wars, now you probably don't remember when Star Wars first came out. It came out in 1977, I believe, and you were
Right. I've seen it all, but I was
you've
born.
seen it up. You were born. Well, when Star Wars first came out, what a lot of people didn't realize is that first Star Wars was not episode 1. It wasn't the first episode. They started in the middle of the story, right?
Yeah.
And then they had 2 more episodes that came out in that time frame, in that season. And yeah, I think it was Return of the Jedi and then like The Empire Strikes Back. Maybe I forget which exact order. But either way, it came out a trio of 3.
Right.
But that was on episode 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
So you had part of the story, but you didn't have the full story. Then later on, they came out with the rest of the book, the rest of the chapters, and then you had a whole picture like, wow, okay, so Darth Vader, who originally we thought was just this evil guy that came out of nowhere, you start to understand, okay, well, in chapter 1, he went through some things,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
And then, okay, I can see, so part of what's happening in our country is we're all born in chapter 14 or whatever, or maybe you're born in chapter 11, and you've got different vantage points of the story. I think as we begin to understand the history and not be afraid of it, understand that, oh, now I see. And I think now, I think that I hope as well to be able to enter into the story. So I would say read the book, understand history. Don't be afraid of it. History is not a bad thing at all.
Yeah.
The Bible has a lot of history in it. And I think as you understand that, it will actually equip you to have the conversation. So, yeah.
That's good. One of my favorite topics to talk about on this series is burnout. So,
Oh, right.
right, I know. I like to talk about it because I struggle with it. So it's always good to get your means. What does being a pastor or being an author, like sometimes does it feel isolating for you?
Definitely being an author, the writing side of being an author was very isolating. I mean, you have to literally escape and be alone. You can't write a book sitting in Starbucks. You can't write a book in a room full of people, or you need to be alone. And so you need to be comfortable being alone. So being isolated, so initially I think being alone in the writing process was not isolation. I think it was solitude, which is more of an intentional like refreshment.
Yeah.
So I think it was like I need solitude to get to this space and to feel the book, right? But then because of deadlines, I ain't isolating. I got something to get done, and that's less life-giving. Isolation can be, and so I think there was a lot of isolation that did start to take its toll on me during the writing process. There was a lot of heavy lifting with writing the book, deadlines. There was a lot of working hard, not taking care of myself, eating a lot of candy and cake, drinking a lot of espresso, not working out. And I think it caught up with me. And so when the book published, I actually did experience some significant burnout. Yeah.
How do you, even after that, like, how do you remember or how do you implement like keeping your heart and your soul like refreshed, even among all of the stuff going on? Yeah,
absolutely. Well, one of these I did learn from the burnout, which was significant, and it took a lot of time to get out of the burnout. And so what sort of awakened me that I was in a process of burnout was it started with a night where I couldn't sleep. I didn't sleep 1 minute. I was like, man, I was up all night, couldn't sleep 1 minute. And then it was the next night, the same thing. Then the next night, actually, I'd gone 4 or 5 days without a single minute of sleep. I knew something was wrong. I called the doctor, and they started throwing all kinds of pills and stuff, and nothing was working. And basically weeks and weeks and weeks, and I was completely fried. So in that process, a good friend of mine reached out to him. I'm like, I'm not doing well. We met up for lunch for coffee, and he began to say, I've been where you are before. And he said, I'm going to give you the playbook out of this. And he said, it's not a pill. It's not a doctor. He said, I want you to do everything I'm telling you to do. And if you do everything I'm telling you to do, in 6 months, not only will you be better, you'll be the best version of yourself ever. And that's what he said to me. And I did everything he told me to do. In 6 months, he was right. I was out of the burnout. for the most part, I was still dealing, with some aspects of it because it takes a long time to come out of burnout. But I would definitely say a year later, I was not, was the best version of myself. I was not better. I was the best I'd ever been.
Wow.
And so, so I'm very conscious of the things that I now need to do to stay healthy in a world that is full of stress, full of potential for burnout. And so the question really is, I think for all of us, is how do you cope with stress?
Yeah.
Right? Stress is coming. Stress is a part of life. It's actually not necessarily a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
The question is, how do you cope with stress? What do you reach for? What are your coping mechanisms? And so, my friend who helped me with this process, he gave me this analogy one time. He said, large ships that go out into the ocean, they have these pumps in them to pump out water when water gets in them, right? You ever seen like those shows where it's like these huge waves? I don't even know the name of the show, but they have these boats out in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah.
And these huge waves get splashing water in there. So they have these pumps to pump the water out. Because the reality is these ships don't sink because of the water around them. They sink because of the water that gets into them. And so they have to use the pumps to get the water out. It's a lot like life. So like when the water and the waves and the stress of life gets into us, what mechanisms do we have to remove the stress out of our lives? And so that's where it's very important and what you reach for to cope with the stress that gets in, which is going to happen.
Can you give us some of your key takeaways from the playbook that he gave?
From the playbook, yeah. I guess I could share a little bit of the playbook.
Really? Secret.
No, I've been sharing a lot with people actually. So the playbook really involves focusing on 4 areas of your life for holistic health. And those 4 areas really are the spiritual aspect of your life, your walk with God, your spiritual lens, how you see the world is very important. We wrestle not with flesh and blood, but there are a lot of things going on in our world. And so if you just turn on the TV and everything you see, you look at it through just the eyes of your flesh, you're going to be wore out all the time. So we need to have a spiritual connection with God that aligns our perspective on Jesus. So there's a spiritual aspect that we have to have in our lives. The other one that I'm going to bring up next is the physical aspect of our lives. Are we tending to that? The physical aspect has to do with our exercise and how we actually exercise. Exercise is a great way to manage stress. We're actually made to move. Every creature on the planet is actually moving, well, most creatures, all day long. The squirrels are running around all day long, right? The birds are exercising all day long. Fish are exercising all day long.
Yeah.
We are really one of the few creatures that will sit all day long, get in a car, and not move our bodies. And then part of why we don't feel right is because we're made to move. So we're going against our very physiology. So we got to move our bodies. The other aspect of the physical is also your diet. What are you consuming in your diet? Like I can tell you right now, I've eaten some food before where afterwards I'm like, whoo, I am wore out. Have you ever eaten a big dish of something bad? Like, some Chinese food, which I love Chinese food, but eat a whole bunch of it. How do you feel afterwards? Tired. Like, I'm exhausted.
I'm ready for a nap.
I'm ready for a nap. Or the food is supposed to be fuel. So if I'm wore out afterwards, what's it telling you? So I have to be. So I learned you got to be careful what you consume, and so I started eating salads, eating more, whole foods. It's not always as fun as eating,
Right.
all the other stuff. But I felt better. I said, wow, I feel light on my feet. I don't feel exhausted after eating lunch. And so how we treat and what we put in our bodies also has an effect on our stress levels and how we feel. The next leg of this, the next pillar, is the mental pillar. What are you consuming with your mind? The people around you, are they helping your mind or are they triggering your mind? Do your friends that text you and all of a sudden your blood pressure goes up because there's something weird going on? You got to check those. The other thing is, what are we consuming in terms of media? Are we scrolling all day to see what the latest craze is and what the latest hot mess is on TV? The cortisol levels are going up or whatever it is. So what are you consuming with your mind, your mental diet? And then the final one is relationships. We are meant for community. Isolation is more dangerous than smoking a pack of cigarettes. That's recently came out in a study. And so we need to have people that we are open with, in fellowship with, in community with, because we actually get healthy hormones from interacting with each other. And so are we in relationship? If you're in isolation, your mental health is not going to do well. So for me, those are the gauges I live by. I look at those particular things. No one is perfect in all of those. I'm not perfect, but I make sure that I'm looking at those going, okay, just like you drive your car, you can't just look at one gauge. You gotta look at all the gauges. You gotta look at everything.
Yeah. Oh, that was really good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Yeah. Well, I learned that the hard way, just so you know. Nobody's do that.
Yeah. So, there's probably somebody who's listening who wants to write or preach or just lead people, but they feel overwhelmed or like unsure of how to do so. What encouragement would you give them?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is make sure God is calling you to it. That is very important. One of the things about preaching or pastoring or ministry, anybody who does this will tell you, like, it's not what it seems. It could be a very heavy weight, and it could be very joyful and fulfilling as well. And so you want to make sure that the Lord has called you to this ministry or to that ministry. The next thing I would say is, if you do feel that calling, and so now, you got to take a step of faith.
Yeah.
You have to say, okay, Lord, you have placed this calling on me. I can't let it go. You have given me pictures of this calling. I'm seeing it, like it's coming up in my sleep. It's coming up in my mind. And so now I have to embrace the call. And I'm going to tell you the next thing you have to do, which is really hard for people, you got to tell somebody.
Okay.
Because once you now tell somebody, now you are now on the hook for it. You are now, it's like, it takes a lot of courage. You have to tell someone you trust, hey, I am sensing that the Lord has called me to this. And so now they're going to look at you and say, well, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And so that's what I would say then. Then you have to take the step of obedience, hear from the Lord, and what that next step is. That's kind of what my experiences was. And what I've seen in a lot of other experiences of people who go in the ministry. Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay. Last question. It's going to be a real hard one.
Okay, great. I love it. I mean, these have been cupcakes, right?
It's not even a real hard one. If people want to get your book, where can they get it?
Yes, you can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, anywhere their books are available online. Just type in my name, Khori, Khori Smith, and Brit is between us. It actually will come up after you just type my name in. My website or even the book will come up, and then get it there. But I would encourage you to read it. It's really just, it's the scriptures, and it's the things that I have learned over the course of years in seminary and in life. And I think people will be surprised when you see like how beautiful of a tapestry the Lord paints with in his word that we often don't see because we sort of read through our own lenses.
Yeah.
But it's very colorful, very beautiful, and has so much oneness. And God's heart is for all nations, all people. He told Abraham, I'll make your father of many nations. And so, yeah, that's what I would say. Anyway, get it online anywhere you can.
Are you also open to sharing your Instagram if it doesn't follow along?
Absolutely. Yeah. You can find on Instagram. Look me up. Khori Smith, Khori Smith. You'll find me on there.
All right.
And so follow me there, and I appreciate that. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming today. I really appreciate you taking time.
Absolutely. It's been an honor and privilege. Thank you so much for having me, Bethany. And God bless you too for stepping into the call. The Lord told you to do it. I'm sure he'd been telling you for a while, and then you did it. And so we sit here today, and you're blessing me and blessing so many others. So make sure you keep doing that work.
Thank you.
Yeah. People are watching, even when you don't realize.
Okay.
Yeah. I've been watching. Yeah. Bless you.
All right. Bye, guys.
See you next time.
Thank you guys so much for spending time with us today. I really loved having you here. If you liked this episode, make sure you share it with someone you know. I'd also love if you guys would comment any questions you might have that we can answer on future episodes. Remember that each one of you was born for such a time as this. Until next time, bye!